Hi there, I'm Bonnie, Log Cabin Stitcher. Welcome to my channel and welcome to my sewing room. And I hope you're ready to see some quilts, to see some stitching, to see a lot of mini quilts, to get inspired. So I hope you can get something comfy to drink, somewhere to stitch, and be ready to take notes maybe. I will try to do the drop-down menu with details, but I think I'm going to be showing so many things. I would never be able to get everything in the drop-down box. And for those of you who are newer to my channel, and I am so grateful for all the new people that have been coming to visit with me, and who haven't seen me from before. I had a 2-year hiatus when we took a long road to move here to Colorado, and I just wasn't up to doing the videos, and now I am, and I am so excited to be answering questions. And I read through a lot of the comments, but I haven't taken the time to sit down and answer comments. So I'm going to try to answer some now in the video, and then I'll respond to the comments too. But I had a lot of really good questions because I said, please ask questions. A lot of the stitching that I do, and you can see my ironing board is packed with things to show you. I don't want the kind of stitching that I do to be a dying art. I do mine a little unusual. It's just what I call primitive stitching, but it's basically, I do hand quilting and I do a modified big stitch. I don't think I will ever be that kind of gal who does a tutorial where you just sit and stitch or watch me stitch. When I'm in person, I love doing that. I was just at my quilt guild showing one of my new friends how to do my stitching. I stitched on my quilt, I gave it to her, I said, go for it, do some stitching. And it's basically just the running stitch, but I did find someone who does great tutorials on stitching. She does a different kind of a stitching, but her name is Jeri Bellini, and I will share her information in the drop down and talk to you later in the video about how I found her. And it's all about the slow stitching, and she's doing something called a dot a day, and I can't wait to get into that, but I've got a lot of projects to finish. But she does, I'm sorry, I've got the fibers. She does amazing videos where she can stitch and show you. Maybe someday I'll do that, but for right now I'm just going to show you a lot of my stitching. I tried to gather some of the patterns. I got into quilting I think 2006. Before that I did a lot of embroidery, and so some of my patterns are from embroidery, but I put them into some mini wall hangings. A lot of those were Brenda Gervais. So I'll share with you some of the patterns as I found them. But I am really encouraging people to find what they have, what patterns that you have. I'm trying to, look, I keep doing that all the time. Can I do this? I'm hoping, I can't, it just doesn't feel right. I want to encourage you to look around your house, find the patterns that you have, and see what you can do with what you've got, and then just be mindful. That's my big thing that I'm doing for myself, is mindful purchasing, mindful gathering, and that's a lot of, I'm very mindful when I stitch, and that's what the slow stitch community is all about, is just that thought process in stitching for calmness, stitching for pleasure, stitching for mental clarity, and that's what I do. So in my last video that I just did about quilting, I was asking questions, and that's what you guys out there have so many answers for me, and I have some answers for you. So let's just share, and let's just help each other figure these things out. So I had asked, how do you guys store your mini quilts? And there was different responses. Some people said they rolled them up. Some people used just rolling them up. Some people used like a pool noodle, rolled it around that and stored them that way. Those are great. I had, and then other people were saying they use the clamp hangers, and that's kind of what I had been thinking about in the past. I know that there's a lot of hangers that have teeth in them, so some people said they wrapped something on those teeth so it didn't go through onto their quilts. This is what I did. I'll put the link. I'm not an affiliate or anything, but it's just sometimes it's helpful just to find something that works. And this is what I found. The Amazon Basics had, see, I'm going to show you some stuff. Amazon Basics had these clamp hangers. So these are the first quilts that I'm going to show you. So these worked great. I love cherry wood. They had all different colors, and I love cherry wood. My floor in the bathroom there is cherry wood. My cupboards are cherry wood. So I got these cherry wood hangers. They're plastic. This is like the first week I've been using them, so who knows if they're going to last very long. I think I got 10 of them for 20 bucks. So they've got some cheesy fabric here, but so far they're good. And a lot of the ones that I looked at, people were saying they wanted swivels. These have swivels, so this can hold quite a few, because if you think there's 4 storing pants, I have some with like 4 in there. So I really got in the mood to iron a lot of my minis because I'm going to store them this way instead of folding them up. And a lot of my things had been in storage, so they had been creased for a long time. And you know, sometimes that's just the way that you have to store things. But now that we're settling here in our marvelous home, my husband got an attic for me. So we had someone come in and help him. But I have an attic to store things in. And I don't know, am I going to put my wall hangings up there or in my quilt closet? So we'll see. Either way, they're going to be flat. So now I ironed these all yesterday, and I thought, oh my goodness, I've got to share these with my stitching family. So these are, a lot of these are old ones. This is a Jeri Bellini quilt pattern. I bought this, like I said, a long time ago, this pattern, but it's Jeri Bellini, P-A-Y-N-E. Her patterns are very hard to come by, but they're very folk arty. But this is where I wanted to share with you also my stitching. This is what I love. This is my slow stitching. So one of my favorites, so I'm probably going to say that about all of them. So I am going to put them flat on the ground because they are so nice and flat. Now, I found out something too about, I shared this with you last time. This was one of my UFOs I just finished, and there you go. And I was so excited. Look at that beautiful stitching. This is why I love the big stitch, why I love my folk art type of quilts, my folk art type of stitching. This is the hand quilting. The last video I shared a lot about the thread that I use, which is the Valdani pearl cotton. So I've got so much to share. I don't want to repeat too much stuff, but I use the Valdani pearl cotton and I do the running stitch. I didn't share my needles with you, so I had some questions about the needles. I'm going to share those with you. I had shared about how I had a bit of a wavy border, and I found out why I had the wavy border. It wasn't just my quilting. So I'll share that tip with you in a minute. Now, see, this is where this one, this hanger, I have 3. Now, when I put them on here, I like my binding to have a little bit of poof in it. So I didn't want to clamp it on the binding. So I have it just right there, like you can see, right above the binding. Let's see if I don't hit Riley. Riley is my little dog. Okay, here's one. So we've got 4th of July coming up, so I can have this on display as 4th of July. I have this whole set. Now, this center part is a pattern. Where are my patterns? Hey guys, where are my patterns? I had them out. They're probably under this pile. It is, oh, here they are. Okay, I have this whole set. I got these a long time ago. So probably early 2000. I think you can still get them. Country Stitches online is Brenda Gervais website. Now she closes it down, opens it up, but a lot of her old patterns are available. I have all 4, but I've only made 3 of them up. So you can see the outside of it, the border. I'm going to throw those over there. The border I made up, and it was, oh, here we go, paper piecing. So it was paper piecing. Where I got this, I don't know. I've been gathering things forever, and I love paper piecing, but this is my paper pieced border, and then my wall hanging. And that's where I got into quilting. I was doing embroidery, and then I took a class called Borders and Bindings, and I learned about making borders. Apparently I didn't learn about squaring up those corners until I got into quilting. And someone said something to me, I was showing them, I was so excited, here's my project. And my friend said, you need to learn about squaring corners up. I thought, oh, you can square corners up. So now I know how to square corners up. I shared this last time, so just gonna show it to you. But again, the stitching, primitive stitching. So check my last video, I share all about that. Otherwise, we're gonna be here for hours and hours and hours. This one, I've shared a lot, but just some. So this is kind of just like show and share, instead of where I just talk all the time and don't show much. Showing you the hand quilting. This is a Joe Morton. This is a Joe Morton pattern, but it's just log cabins, little log cabins. Okay, so here, look at this one's got 4 of them in there. We've got 4, and I'm so pleased. It was really fun to have these hanging and just looking at them in the hanging, because I was talking about that I love things matchy-matchy, and I love things to coordinate, and it's very fun because my bathroom floor and cupboards match this. So I had these hanging in my bathroom because I have kind of drawing hooks in there, and they were cute, and I wanted to keep them nice so that I can show you guys. This one has, this is probably why I'm going to be sneezing soon. So this was one. So again, hand quilting, and you can create a lot of interest just with the stitching. And in the last video, I showed some of the stencils that I have, but this is just a mini charm. It was a Jan Paddock mini charm pack, and I just did lights and darks and half square triangles. Here is one of my favorites, and this is one where the corners, I think this was one, yeah, the corners are not quite as tight as they could be. This one is, here we go. Oh, yeah, it just looks a little different, the pattern, but country stitches online. So a lot of these, I was interesting when I was on Brenda's website, I saw a lot of these old patterns on her website. So this is embroidery. The pattern called for buttons here, and I never did that, and I was playing with my buttons, and I thought, I like them just the way it is. So embroidery was my thing, but Osnaburg stretches out a little bit, so it's not all taut, but a lot of stitching, so just fun stitching around the edge. So this is what, when I was watching a lot of the slow stitching videos, it's like I slow stitch, but it's just in this form of slow stitch. A lot of people, if you haven't heard of slow stitching, a lot of people, if you just search on YouTube slow stitching, K3N and Jeri Bellini are 2 that I've been watching a lot and doing lots of different projects, a lot of different projects on slow stitching. And it's just interesting to see what you can do. But I was thinking, this is kind of like my slow stitching. So far away one, but this one, see, by my hand, I was into Brenda Gervais. But this one, I did a lot of different embroidery stitches around the edge and just kind of fun. But when I do embroidery, I have some embroidery videos that I did years ago. I think I did 2 embroidery videos, and it's like this, where I like tell you all about it, all about everything. So it's not like a quick, fast-paced how-to, it's just how Bonnie does it. But I did embroidery a lot probably early 2000s. And I did, so when when I was ironing this the other day, it got even more wrinkled, but it's because when I do embroidery, I put batting behind it so that as I'm doing my stitches, it has something to bite into besides the fabric, but then it creates this. But if I hadn't messed with the iron as much, it wouldn't have been so gathered. So I'm learning, but I was ironing. That is definitely a wonky corner. This was one my mom did, and it was incorporating paper piecing and applique and embroidery. So a fun one from my mom. And here was like, this was the first one I tried. So this is one way. So one of my viewers, one of you guys out there, said that you use the clamps, and you can get wider hanging, I think they're called clamp hangers or something. But I was just searching on Amazon, and they have wider ones, but I really liked that these were flat and held the felt lining inside, so it was softer. But this, someone was saying that they use these and they can loop it like a loose loop like this, but you could just do one with a loose loop and have the back up if it's a longer one. So this was one of my, this is paper piecing, the 6-inch pineapple blocks from It's So Emma. These are like addictive to me. I've done so many of these. They're like the potato chip things where I just use my scraps, and I love these. So this one was cool where I could have it up like that. It's not going to have a big fold, so I can either do it like this, or I can hang it on a wall and put 2 hooks up there. So I haven't figured out exactly how I'm going to do it, but I just thought these are so nice and ironed, and I'm not going to have to worry about quilts in my minis. I also have quilts stored under this bed. I have a raised platform. I am losing my voice already. 17 minutes in it. We can't have that. We have hours to go. But I got a raised platform bed so I can put lots of crap under there. So I've got a lot of fabric storage and quilts stored under this bed. I think it's up like 14 inches, so I can get plastic boxes under there. I tend not to put the lid on the plastic box so that it breathes. But if the mini quilt is small enough that it can go in that plastic box flat, that's the easier place to store it. Otherwise, I've got all these. But I had another question asking if I hand quilt everything. No, I do some machine quilting. I'm just not a confident machine quilter. It makes me nervous. I have done it, and I have gotten into a rhythm, and I've done it kind of artsy with like fiddlehead fern kind of things, and that was fun, but I need to get more confident. So that's where I would really like to. I got a Janome from my sewing machine from my mom. That's beautiful for machine quilting. And that's what I'm going to be using to get more confident in doing that. And you really have to get into the zone. But I commented back and said I really do hand quilt the majority of my quilts, even a ginormous one. I don't know if you guys can see this, but it is ginormous. And it was very heavy. But I do hand quilt because for me, it's very peaceful and mindful and makes me happy to have needle and thread in my hand. I'm going to share with you I had lots of questions about my threads and the needles, so those are coming up. But first, so I can take the load off of this ironing board. I have never shared this quilt, I don't think. When we were living up at the cabin full time, in a little tiny space, I did a lot of the stitching sitting on my bed. Now we had like an A-frame, and not quite A-frame, but it was slanted walls, and so I had a pillow that I could sit up in bed, and that was where I did most of my stitching because it was such a small living space. But when I'm doing a big quilt, it really helps to have it spread out on the bed. I don't stitch in a hoop. As far as quilting, now cross stitching, I stitch in a hoop. but I like to have the freedom of using my hands to manipulate how I'm doing the size of the stitches. So I think I finished this whole thing at the cabin. And the funny thing is, I made it for a king size bed that we had in California, and now we got queen size. So it's too big, and that's where I had to get the platform to lift it up. But it was harder on my little dog. I've got a Chiweenie who's asleep right now. But it was higher, so it was harder for him to jump down, but the quilt looked great. So you're in no way going to be able to see this whole thing. This is a Kim Deal. I love my favorite designers, and many of yours too. Kim Deal, Pam Buddha, Joe Morton, Jan Paddock, Blackbird Designs, a lot of the folk arty, primitive kind of patterns, but this was one called Sticks and Sprigs. But instead of a lap quilt, I made it a king size, and it's big and it's heavy, and I did it with warm and natural batting, which I will never do. I will never make a king size quilt again. But it was very, very heavy. So it's a great winter quilt. But it was heavy to manipulate and heavy to stitch. So here we go. I've never shown it before, and I don't know if you can see it behind me. When I usually do my floss tube cross stitch videos, I have another view of my room, and this is on the bed behind me in the videos. And that's where I've just thought, how am I, well, I was cleaning the sheets today, freshening things up, and I thought, let's just show you. So I don't even know how I'm gonna hold this because it is so big and heavy, but it turned out so beautifully. And let's see if I can hold you. So it's log cabin blocks, but Kim likes to change up, Kim Deal changes up her traditional blocks, and this had the 9 patch. Sometimes she does churn dashes, but this was, so I've got all my threads there. This was the quilting that I did in that, and this was where I was really seeing I do like the stitches to show more. I used to kind of hide them, but I really liked it. So this whole thing was done in the darker Valdani pearl cotton, but the border is, may I say, outstanding. I love this. So this is one of my favorite quilts. So this is so fun, where even this flower has that same kind of design. But this is why I love the hand applique, hand quilting, because it gives the dimension. And that's one thing I mention a lot. But when I saw my mom's, she did needle turn applique, and she did a lot of hand quilting. Not so much the big stitch, but kind of a regular, smaller hand quilting. The dimension is what caught me, and I thought, I've got to do this. And because before I was doing more of a flat applique, but this is why I love, I just love looking at it. And even though it's so heavy, this one is still on this bed right here. But lots of fun colors, and I don't know how I could ever do a picture of this quilt because it's so huge, but here you go. So very fun, but you can tell. Oh, see, my arm is even heavy now. My arms were so heavy because I really had to manipulate and turn it as I'm doing this. So a lot of it was straight stitching, but not around all these flowers and leaves. I was turning it. Sometimes I could just turn, I figured out how to turn just a portion of the quilt. So, whew. Now, my mom's the one that taught me how to do the big stitch. I was cleaning out some quilts my mom had made for her great-grandchildren when my mom passed away with dementia, Alzheimer's, and she did not have any great-grandchildren, but she made a lot of quilts as best she could for her great-grandchildren. And she would not have any yet. I don't have grandchildren. Good chance I won't have any grandchildren. So this was one, I'm borrowing this. This was one for one of my son's children. So since he doesn't have children, I'm going to hang on to this for now. But hers was bright. So because 4th of July is coming up, I'm going to have this for use and display. But hers, she loved. She was such a vibrant woman. She loved vibrant, bright colors. She liked white. Like I would never, I just don't use, even though the 30s, typical 30s fabrics, which she loved, typically does white background. If I am making a 30s one and it is off-white, but I traditionally don't do white. But this is just another example of hand quilting. So there we go. Now I had shared with you about this one. This one I just finished last night, and this is where I realized this is the 3rd binding that I have put on with a featherweight. That's a featherweight, and I had a question, what is a featherweight? I'll share with you more about what featherweights are for those of you who may not know. But I bought this attachment from the featherweight shop. I love the featherweight shop. So this attachment, a walking foot, I love walking feet. And for my other machines, my plastic machines, I love the walking foot. I always use the binding, and sometimes if it's on there, I just sew with it too because I just like it. But I realized a featherweight machine, a sewing machine, they were made, the ones that I have were made in the 50s. They were made, I believe, from like 1936 up to the 60s. They're metal, and they're very beautiful, simple machines, but they don't act just like a regular machine. Like I started sewing when I was 16, and I got my own sewing machine when I graduated at 18. So I just got this baby, popped it on, and started sewing. Didn't even think that I needed to watch one of the featherweight shop has tons of videos. I learned kind of the hard way, because this binding I had started, and I hand sew all my bindings. I don't know that I will ever machine sew a binding on, but that's slow stitch, but it's soft. That's what people say with the hand quilting, it's soft. But I had a wavy border, and I thought, this is the 3rd quilt that I've done with a wavy border, and I've been quilting for a long time. This one is a bit wavy, but that one's a whole different ball game, and I'm going to share about that one too. Hang with me if you can. Pause me, take me in sections, because I do talk a lot, but I give a lot of information. It takes me a lot to get one of these videos going, and it's like, all right, I'm never going to stop. But see, I got a pretty good square, but it was gathering. So I watched one of the featherweight videos, and let me show you what the quilt is. And so I realized it was that I had not paid attention to how I should have done it, and I should have done the largest stitch possible. So, because I think I stretched. Anyway, I'm going to be learning about it, but I'm new to the featherweights, but I love them. But now I learned, I was able to starch this and get it so it's going to be flat. I just didn't take the time to do the whole thing. This one is this the right way up? I shared this with you last time, but it's the bundling board by Primitive Stitches by Linda, L-Y-N-D-A. So this is, I'm standing on my quilts that I ironed. So this is the quilt. It will fit on the wall behind me in a cross stitch video. So when I do a floss tube, it'll be on the wall behind me. But one thing I wanted to share was about the walking foot, and it was about me not paying attention to the technical differences between a featherweight and another traditional machine. But on the last video I was sharing how this particular stencil pattern was hard to flip. This one, you can see, this is the way it's supposed to go. Nice and smooth. This one, and that's the wonky part. And I was going to redo it, and I thought I'd have to unstitch so much to do it. So let me take a breath. Let me take a breath. Okay. So many of you have commented that you guys think just like me, where I get like, I'm all over the place, have so much to share, off the wall, and it's just the way of thinking. So I am so glad I'm not alone. Even though I'm alone in my room, I know there's a lot of you out there watching me that think this way too. So I had questions about how I choose fabrics for a quilt, and that's what I'm hoping to share with you today. In showing all these things, I will get to that. But when I was putting together this quilt, I mentioned that there was a quilt that you hadn't seen finished that I really loved, and it had a lot of darker colors, darker purples and darker reds. So this was, I have the quilt. I have that quilt to share with you. But this was inspired. So the darker blues, and we have blue. I was so over the blues. I did wood decorations. I was a woodworker for, I don't know, 25 years, a long time. I still have all my fingers, which is great. I did a lot of, one of them isn't quite normal, but that was because I learned the hard way not to do something on one of my big tools. But squirrel, I'm picturing the blood that was dripping on the floor when that happened. So I'm not a woodworker anymore. But the blue and the mauve, I did it woodwork 80s, 90s, early 2000s. Blue and mauve. So I was so over blue. The house that we bought had blue countertops, and the kitchen, it's mostly beautiful. But I'm coming to terms with blue and even embracing blue now. So blue is now going to be part of my quilts. But anyway, so darker colors. This is something that I do. Like as I was quilting, I found a place where the hand applique hadn't stitched all the way down. So this was just finished last night. So I'm going to have to come back, but I do safety pins to remind me to come back somewhere and finish something up. But that's the bundling board. And the one so I had started, this was one of the very first patterns that I purchased. This, and I still remember I went to Ginger's Quilt Shop in Upland. Fantastic quilt shop, fantastic mother and daughter that owned it. That's where I took my borders and binding class. And I remember seeing this on the wall, and as I was new to quilting, thinking, could I do that? Could I do that? And it was just like, I've always loved folk art. So I bought this, and I was just looking because I thought, I know somebody out there is going to want to make it. eBay had some of these for like $3 something. There was a couple out there, but also, so be not dismayed if you watch this a couple days after it's up and all the patterns are gone. But this one is called Mountains and Meadows, and it's by Cheryl Wall, Country Quilts. Now, mine has changed a little bit, so let me show you what I changed. I didn't like the whoop-de-doop-de-doop thing. I changed it up. Pretty much everything else is the same. I either really change something or I keep it very similar. Now, in case you can't get that single pattern and you want it, there is a book called, I wrote it down, you can get a book, and Amazon was the first place I looked, and you can get used books at Amazon. So I am always looking for the used. I get a lot of pattern books, and I'm always looking for the used ones. Generally, it's pretty true. Like if they tell you it's in good condition, generally it is. Otherwise, contact the seller. I did that one time with a DVD that was missing. Okay, so Mountains and Meadows. Oh, where did I write that down? Okay, I'll show you this guy in a minute. And the ribbon that goes with it. But this is how, so this is how my mind works. This is how I do my quilt journal. It's like a quilt diary. So it has a lot of information, and some of it is like literally about a diary. But a lot of information about my quilts, all in one little compact place. I love this craft paper, and I don't care that it gets oily and messy, because this makes me happy, and it's almost full. So I will do another one exactly like this, but I can go back. I tagged it, and let's see, I can show you this, but I don't think any super personal stuff was in there. And if it was, I would just tell you anyway, because that's how I am. But there is a book called Country Comforts by Cheryl Wall. There's tons of them available used, and I think they're like under $10 even with shipping. So, and it had 10 patterns in that book, and I thought, oh, should I get one? And then I'm looking, nope, no girl, I already have another one. So this was my other one that I got by Cheryl Wall, used. But this one I will be doing quilts coming to a video near you. But I love used old books. Anyway, I love Cheryl Wall's stuff. That was Riley, it was right there. Where were we, guys? Gosh, I love doing the videos as if you were here. So I'm getting tired, and I still have so much to show you because I got to put it away. And then I was going to say, what was I talking about before I got on that little rabbit trail? I was showing you, oh, I was going to tell you about this quilt. So quilts always have stories. This one has a huge story. Now, I started this forever ago. And so you can see it's just about, but look at, see, I like my border better. My better border, but otherwise pretty much exactly like that. But this was darker. This was Vintage Reserve by Minnick & Simpson. There's so much I remember just about getting, it was a fat quarter pack that was gifted to me because I picked it out. And anyway, so this one, I was sharing about this in, I think it was 2020, 2021. I was sharing about this before it was hand quilted. And I was sharing about how you should start and finish quilts pretty quickly within your skill level. Because this one, it was when I was a new quilter and I wasn't really amazing at matching corners. And it really showed up on the corners. And I was thinking I could undo those and do them again. I thought, heck no, I just want to get the stupid quilt done. So I had a bad attitude about it because some of the piecing was just not amazing. But I decided if I make it wild, it was already wild with all of the applique. So if I do some wild quilting, no one's ever going to notice that the pieces don't match up. And it's actually like if it bothers somebody else, I don't really care because I do these for me. I usually would not put these in a show. This one happened to go in a show and it did win a prize, which is so fun. So I've got all my stuff behind me. I will try to show it. And I'm looking out the window. Is anybody out there looking at me? Because this one is one of my favorite quilts. You've heard that before. And it's pretty much all the same. But what is so special about this quilt is that this was the one that I took with me when we got out of our cabin when the blizzard of last year, 2023, came. We were displaced from our cabin, and I've talked about that before, where we were living full time. We were displaced for a month and a half because there was so much snow we couldn't even get to our cabin. And if I had stayed there where I was thinking I was going to while my husband went down the hill for a doctor's appointment, I probably would have gotten stuck there. So I'm very grateful that I left. And I thought I'd just be gone for a week, but I had just sandwiched this quilt together and I thought, oh, this will give me something to do. Well, it gave me a lot to do and I finished it right before we got back. But the hand quilting was very fun. And I know this is so Valdani thread changes dye lots a lot. So when I got this one was called M60 and it had like a purple, greeny teal, and like a gold. And if I ever found those particular ones again, I would buy several balls of it. But I rebought it and it's not as dark, but this is one of my favorite quilts. But I I had to figure out how, when you're hand quilting, you have to figure out, you know, usually I'm echoing. So you can see I echo, quilt. So I did mark this out. So this was just a 1/4 inch away from the edge. Echo stitched, and I don't know if you can see, yeah. So here's more of the gold. Here's more of the tealy green, I think. And here's more of the purple. But you can really see the stitching. Like I said, that's what I wanted. But I usually echo stitch in some way or another, stitching around that. And I always do all the layers. Even when I have one that has like 5 layers, I'll do all the layers. But I had to figure out, how am I going to do this? So this is where I was at my mother-in-law's house. We went from place to place to place. And my husband said, oh my gosh, we're like gypsies. And so this quilt was called Mountains and Meadows. So I renamed it Gypsy Meadows because it was, I don't know how many places that we went to, California and Colorado twice before we got back to my cabin. So this one I called Gypsy Meadows. But I wanted to figure out how was I going to quilt this? Well, this was the first, not the first one I've done with circles, but you can kind of see I drew out, and I'll show you how to do that. Super easy. I drew out a circle and I made a stencil, and that's where all of these, so this one is a circle. I just did, each block is a circle. Oh, the sun's coming in and you can kind of see that circle. So it was fun, and yep, it's continuous, but I'm turning the quilt, and that's where I generally do it. Most of the time I was on at my mother-in-law's house, sitting on the bed that I was sleeping in there, or we were at my dad's house after he had passed away, and we were cleaning it out. So it was a very emotional trip, but it felt so good for me to have a quilt as I traveled. So even though this was pin based, and even though this had pins all over it, I still slept underneath it and had it on my bed because it just makes me happy and it makes me feel like home. So this quilt is so special to me. Now, the other thing I had shared about in the last video, see, I'm just going to hold it. In my last video, I had shared about my Lake Arrowhead, California Mountain Quilt Guild. So we're called the Woods. I'm still in that quilt guild, and I got to go recently when I was out in California, I think last month. I went to the Quilt Guild, and they have an amazing thing called the Quilt Walk. And they do and I shared about it in the last video, but it's going to be this year. They're doing one again, and it will be September 21st of 2024 up in Blue Jay. So Blue Jay, California. I'll put the link to it. I was hoping to go this year, but I don't think it's going to work into my travel plans. But if any one of you live close to that area, I was a part of it last year. I had never done it before, and even though we had been up at, we'd had a cabin up there for decades, I never went to it. I just never went to it. So I went for the first time last year, and it was an amazing day for me. I loved it. I was one of the white glove people, and we had quilts hanging on the little main street, and we had quilts hanging, and people came, and I got to share and talk about the quilts. And I had this guy up because we were just displaying, just putting up beautiful quilts, just like the Sisters Oregon, but on a very small scale, just for people's enjoyment. And that was after, so that was right after the Snowmageddon had happened, and so that community was hit so hard with the snow. We were gone, and many of my friends were there and snowed in, and the food was dwindling. It was very impactful for those that had to stay there, even though for me it was impactful that I couldn't get home. That's where our home was. Anyway, it was so important for me because it had not happened since pre-lockdown COVID. Everything, the world shut down, and it couldn't happen. So this was going to be the first one after lockdown and after Snowmageddon, the big snow blizzard. And there was some devastation up there. There was fires, there was roofs that caved in, there was hardship up there. So I had really wanted to be a part of it, I went from Colorado to stay at the cabin. We were there for a couple months last year, and I wanted to do it because of giving back to my community. So giving back to the people that had suffered and just lived through this crazy blizzard. So there was many reasons. I'm getting goosebumps why that day was so special to me, but getting to know people. And then we had quilts up, and there was only one award that was given, and it was for viewer's choice. So I was the one that was walking around with pencils and paper, and I would say, you guys get to vote on your favorite quilt. And so everyone got to vote on the viewer's choice. There was lots. We have so much talent up there on the mountain. And where's my ribbon? So this quilt won the viewer's choice, but that was my ribbon. But it was so cool because this was my blizzard quilt. So it was just so special. That's the kind of award that I want to get, not necessarily by a quilt judge, which we just had that talk at our quilt guild. It was a quilt judge talking, and it's amazing what they go through to get certified to do that and what they look for. But a viewer's choice, that mattered so much to me. So anyway, that's why that one was special. Now back to how to do that. So what I did was to make the my brain, to make the stencil, I got plastic, and I have so much sitting here, guys. That's where it's like, oh, please hang with me if you want to the end, because I have to get all this stuff put away. So I just get plastic. So I didn't have any with me. Went to Joann's, got plastic. I think I even had to buy marking pens. I didn't have stuff with me because I wasn't going to be gone that long. But I just get template plastic. This is a heavier duty one. And I just put it on. I think I got a piece of paper. That's what I did. First I got some paper, made it the size of the block, and I just, because it's freeform kind of, but I wanted them to be consistent. So I just kept drawing circles, not perfect circles, but just drawing circles until I got one that was comfortable. And then I traced that with a Sharpie marker on top of this, and then I cut it out, and I didn't have, all I had was scissors. So I just followed that line with a scissor, and then I followed it back again so I could make like an 1/8 inch groove within that plastic, and that's what I used for my marking. And I love that quilt so much for so many different reasons. But the circles, I really, even though it's kind of hard because you're turning the quilt so that you can do the circle, I just love it. It's very soothing to me to look at the circles. So I've been doing quite a few circles, and so this was like, oh my goodness, how am I going to store these, because they were like slinkies kind of all over the place. I found this at Hobby Lobby. It's a 12 by 12 storage thing for like $1. So they're all in here. So let's get these out. So for that quilt, Gypsy Meadows, this was they're all stuck together now. That's why these things, see, they're like a pain in the neck to store, but it keeps them. That's where that 12 by 12, even though one of them, I've done a quilt that's a big one, bigger than the 12 by 12. Goodness knows. Okay, there we go. So this was my Gypsy Meadows. So this is how I did it. And because it was so thick, it was hard on the scissors, but this is the thing. This is how I did it. And I would kind of, like, when I go to do them, sometimes I'll try to keep these lined up like block to block to block, so they're kind of the same. Otherwise I do them all over the place. But I love the circles. So I have another quilt I'll show you maybe on the next video. And see, I've made smaller ones. This is the big giant one. So there is that big giant quilt, but I didn't even want to get that out to show you, but I just wanted to show you. So I'm not going to show you the quilt. I'm just going to show you the stencil. if I can. This is why it was such a pain in the neck to have this laying around, and it didn't fit anywhere. Good grief, there we go. No, it's not even correct, but this is how big this baby is. But so this one was softer plastic because that's what I had. But I even had to figure out what was the right side, but I have a giant block that I did that on. And I love it, but we'll see if I can get these back in there. So that's just, I really like to inspire you guys to think, just because they don't sell a stencil doesn't mean you can't make your own up. They are kind of easy to use, the thicker. So there's, I think, 3 thicknesses of plastic, and it's easy to make them up. Sometimes you can just draw something. Maybe you can have your kids draw something, but just stitch. Here's another one that I'm going to be working on, and this is to answer the question, how do you, I wanted you to get inside my head. It's a scary place in there. This is a quilt that I made up at the cabin, and I still need to hand quilt it. So this is how I pin based. I have a rug that's a tight weave, and it was at my California house. We have it in the front room here now. It's big enough. That's my quilting carpet, and that's how I just sit and I pin baste. But it's a whole lot easier to work on the smaller one. So this is how I pin baste, and I just wanted to share with you today. I was just choosing the thread and deciding. I had to lay this out and really try to think, how am I going to quilt this? So this is just a good example for how am I going to figure out how to quilt this. I didn't, and I am going to hand quilt it, but I didn't know what am I going to do. So I just laid it on the floor, and I kept thinking, and sometimes I'll sit there with it and have my hand go, because I want to do continuous as much as possible. So I was just trying to draw things out, and it's like, this is really going to be a pain in the neck. And then I figured something out. I can do a grid. So I'm going to get a quilt ruler, one of my long ones, and I am going to do a grid. So my arm hurts from all these quilts, but if you can see, this line follows through to this line, and it can go all the way. So with a very long ruler, I'm just going to make lines, and I like to accentuate things. So this will get accentuated, but see, I will go from here to here, straight across here, from here to there, and down. And so I even got my ruler, my long quilting ruler out, and I was like, is this going to work the way I think? So it's going to be a grid, and then I will do, I have the pattern of something I figured out for out here too. So you know from the last video that I have a lot of the Valdani threads, and I use them all the time. But I wanted to share with you how I kind of do my stuff. So this is, so I was saying last time that in the evenings, I just want to grab something and stitch. That's where, even like, no matter what I'm doing during the day, usually I can think, I just get to sit and stitch at night. And that's the beauty of slow stitching and stitching for comfort stitching. So I have all this ready. I can just grab it. So these are the threads that I'm going to use. And I have probably 100 different colors of Valdanis. But how do I choose the colors? So a lot of times, is this going to be the best? I guess so. This is what we're going to do. I will get all my possible, like, I'll just look, I have them all stored. I will do a studio tour someday. I have them all stored like this, where the number is up and the color is there. And so I'll just get this one. This one just happens to be a new one. But I don't need the whole thing for this quilt, so I could use a partial one. And I'll just lay this across. And I had one that was more of a charcoal color, but this one you can see is very black, and there's really no charcoal in here. It's mostly black. So that's what I wanted. So what is this one? I don't have my glasses on. You'll be able to see it better. Is it upside down for you? 0531. So size 12. And I will show you, I am going to show you the needles for this. So That's how I decide the color. And then the variegated, sometimes in a border, if it's variegated, it will fade into the border where the fabric where I'll see, oh, I can see the stitching, and then I can't see the stitching because it has faded in. So I really want this because I really love this fabric. I think I'm just going to use the solid black, and it's going to be a design, but it's going to be, because this is got enough excitement going on. But that's how I do my thing, and then I will just use scraps of whatever. This looks like bamboo. I will never use polyester again, but I think I had been given some bamboo batting, and I loved it, and so that's bamboo. It's not polyester. So this one's all ready to go. Generally, I like to choose. I don't like to pay full price for a backing, so I just buy stuff on sale, and I usually want to choose something where the stitching is going to kind of fade in. So hopefully that will fade in as much as possible. But here's the stencil. It's all stored. Here's the stencil that I get, the Quilting Company, and this is one I've used recently, and I like it because I like to try to emulate something, and I was like, see that square, this square. So I really like to get everything going together. So that's there, and we talked about marking last time. But here I even have this all together, my bowen, and I have the refills. This is a very sharp tip, and then I also have the Fons and Porter chalk, but I have a pencil sharpener in here. It's not fine tip. And then this is my favorite, and I see that it's on Amazon, and this is a water erasable blue chalk. My mom used to use pencil a lot, but I have not had trouble so far with the blue water erase not coming out yet. I know there's always that potential, but that's kind of how I think through how am I gonna stencil something. So that one took a lot of thinking. I finished that last year when we were up at our cabin for the 3 months in the fall. Okay, now water. Okay, now what needles do I quilt with? This is what I love Peacemaker's needles. You can get them on Amazon, but I order them usually directly from the store, and because I have to pay shipping, I also order these things, the ultra fine threaders. These are my favorite threaders, and I have a lot of needle books, and these, like, generally when I'm done with a quilt, and I'm using these for my hand applique. So that's the other thing. If you're gonna order from Peacemakers, and other companies sell these needles too. I happen to like Peacemakers. They're a store in Costa Mesa that my mom introduced me to. But this is the size. It is 5 through 10 assorted. So I have lots of different sizes. I'm finding the smallest ones can be used for embroidery, but when I sew on my binding, this is the size of needle. I will show you the thread I use for my binding. That's the size of needle. Now the missing ones, those are the ones that I use for my hand quilting. So my general rule is use the smallest needle I can to hand quilt, but it must have a big enough eye to fit the Valdani pearl cotton through. Now when I was showing my friend how to quilt, I also showed her, I get the end of the thread, which people say don't get the end of the thread wet. I always do. I get the end of the thread wet, I squash it flat, and then I even put it in my finger and then use the eye of the needle to squash it flat, and then I try to thread the needle because it needs to be flat to go through the eye of the needle because I'm using smaller needles. But that's where I would encourage you guys. John James and Bowen, John James has approximately this size too. But anyway, this is going to be great because you will be able to find a needle that you can actually thread, and you cannot use a needle threader for the Valdani. So I just happened to order those from Peacemaker. That's for regular thread. But with the Valdani, that's why I wet it, flatten it, and get it through. And so the first couple stitches you're going to take with a new needle, it still has some friction on there from however they make it. But then as you stitch, it will go through easier and quicker. Maybe someday, if I get brave, I'll figure out how I show you how I do it. But I use my hands to work together as you're doing the running stitch. And I like the top stitch, the stitch on top, to be about smaller than a quarter, so maybe 3/8 of an inch. I think so, maybe 3/8 of an inch. And the one that thread that goes underneath, I like it smaller, so I'm using my hands together. That may make no sense, but I would say just get needle and thread and do it. So there's my answer on the embroidery. I also, okay, so I think I've answered as many questions as I can about the Valdani and the hand quilting. So let me address questions that I had about thread. Oh my goodness, we still have other stuff to show. Other questions about the thread. So to stitch on my binding, so I use the walking foot to get that machine stitched on the binding, but then I hand stitch, you know, you're flipping it over, and I hand stitch the binding on after I've done the first layer. I'm already, okay, it's an hour into it, but you know, if you're doing the binding, you already know. But when I love to get the binding, I heard long ago, get the binding done when you get the quilt top done so that you've got everything in together. And I even have my quilt label to be able to have that for my pumpkin. This is for another pumpkin quilt. Anyway, DMC. I happened to get a lot of DMC because I'm addicted to color. So I bought all the possible DMC colors that I would need, because this is what I used originally for hand applique. I have a lot of these colors, so I use this. This is 50 weight, and that's what I machine sew with. DMC is a good thread. So I would machine sew with DMC or the Arrowhead. That's the next thing. I keep thinking like I'm telling you the next thing up, but that's just the way I got to do this. So I have a lot. So I have a lot of colors, and so I want to use the 50 weight to sew on my binding because I want it a little bit stronger. So that's where, but I was doing the hand applique needles. Here's the next thing. I was using the hand applique needles for the binding, and then I was breaking them. So the DMC is what I use for machine sewing and the binding. And let me just show you my colors, because I'm all about storage and colors and collecting. So this, but I didn't like the noise. So this is part of my collection of my DMCs. But as you hand applique, you need lots of colors because you want that to fade in. You want that to be invisible. So I have all my beautiful colors. The next thing, I have those things everywhere. I'll show you what those are. They're my little thimbles that I use. But this was, I wanted to, I don't know if you can see, but my mom had this neat wood end table thing that rolled. And so I use that for my threads, and then I can pull that out and have that like a little extension table. But I turned that sideways so you could see it, but I keep my threads in there, and they're just pretty and they fit in there nice. So DMC sewing machine thread for binding and quilting. And then I had a lot of good questions, so that's where I really want to address those. But before I forget, let me finish with the hand applique. This is how my mother taught me. These are tiny needles. So sometimes, and that's where this is what I use this for. So the ultra fine threader from Peacemakers is what I use, because the eye of that is tiny. And so this is what I use this for. But I have tons of these because I bought some and then I inherited my mother's. So I will always, as long as I can still thread these, I will use these. They're very tiny needles, and so I can get tiny stitches. But the hand applique so this is just a little bit about lots of things, but kind of answering questions hopefully, or giving you more things to ask questions about, which is great. Ask me the questions. When I hand applique, this was just an extra one. This is because it was kind of too wild. This is how I applique. I turn the edges under. I do the freezer paper method. And I turn those edges under so that they're all ready, so that when I use the Roxanne fabric glue to glue that on, I just stitch. And I can't even remember years ago if I shared a little bit more about it, but you can see edges are turned under, so even little tiny things, I can have that ready to stitch. But I love the hand applique, and I'll share more about that later. Ask me some questions, and we'll see if I can get those answers to you. But this is, again, this is just another quilt. My DMC thread to do the binding, which is all ready. This is the Valdani to do the quilting. So, machine stitching. I love Arrowhead. A-R-I-F-I-L, A-U-R-I-F-I-L. I don't know. I can't even read it. Oh, A-U-R-I-F-I-L. Okay. I love storage. So Arrowhead thread, high quality, not lots of lint. That's where I had years worth of thread from when I was 16. I started sewing years worth of different threads, and then I really learned that the higher quality threads don't have lots of lint, and it's not going to gunk up your machines. So I'm going to take care of my machines, and I like high quality thread. So Arrowhead 50 weight, and you can buy these. So I think these cases at one time were like $5, but they store these nicely, and then I can have these. They all fit right there, and it's right next to me. I use this on my featherweight as well. So Arrowhead 50 weight. I do have some 40 weight, which is thicker, because I'm thinking about, I want my stitching to be strong. So Arrowhead, and then this is my way that I keep these bobbins going. This is like, I don't know. They have these all over the place, but this is a great way to have my bobbins in here. Not for my featherweight. This is just for my other two plastic machines. So that's all this stuff. So you know kind of what's behind me. All that goes under there. Now, the original question was from this box. So I shared this last time, and I talked about this last time, but somebody was asking, this is what I hand quilt with. So these are beautiful. This is Arrowhead, but it's 80 weight. So it's very, very thin. And the first time I was introduced to this was when I was at the one and only retreat, I think official retreat that I went to, and a lady saw what I was doing, and there was vendors there, and she said, you've got to go look at the 80 weight, because I think you're really gonna like it. And oh my goodness, I love wood, so that's how you spell Arrowhead. But this is the 80 weight, and this is what I hand quilt with. But it is not a machine quilting thread because it's thin. But when the first time I bought a little collection, the first time I went to applique with it, it was like butter. It was like when you do wool applique, the needle just goes through it. So this is amazing. And I talked about, in my last video, quilting video, I talked about these are like my go-to colors. I do have more, but these are my go-to colors. So, oh, let me mention these two. So that's the other thing for all, because I always talk about these, but it's in some of my older videos. These. So they come in a package. I just cut it shorter, but it's colonial. I did get these on Amazon, and you get 12 of these, and they stick on the pad of your finger. So that's what I call my driving finger. And then, yes, I have, look at that. That is a beautiful callus, because the needle, that's how I feel, how I'm quilting. And Jeri Bellini talks about that too. You sew through your finger sometimes, but you get a great callus, and Scout's honor. But anyway, that's what I use. So those are all the things I use, but I've got a lot of needles because I do a lot of stitching, and this is how I keep them stored, all my fun things. but I use them. So since I just mentioned Jeri Bellini, I would love for you guys to go. I've been watching her, and the videos, she's very, very good at explaining videos. So all the things that I don't do. She is doing something, projects, and it's called a dot a day. And then she has all these dot projects. So they're basically circles. So I was just going through, this is how I keep my applique pieces in case I need to. So this was for the quilt I just did, the bundling board, which I don't think I showed you. So that one, this is the bundling board. That was the quilt. This is how I keep all my stuff together, and even so much as an extra piece. So that was an extra flower center that I didn't use, and I was just putting stuff away, and I thought, oh, I'll have that for my a dot. So that's kind of what the dot a day are. It's just slow stitching, which is really for the mental health, but it's using scraps. And Jeri, one of her videos, she was showing her basket that she brought with her to her little beach house, and it was just so she could sit and just do it. And so they were scraps, they were templates, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to do that so I can have a little basket like that with all my stuff, because that's what I love to do, sit and stitch. Go outside, sit and stitch. So this is kind of what you could grab. When I do my floss tube videos, it's right behind me. So this is where I throw, like this was just from that quilt the other day. So this was the leftover of the backing when I trimmed it down. These are just scraps. Then I divide them up. So I will dump this out and all the scraps get divided so I can easily pull things out. But that's why Jeri's dot a day really attracted me, of like using scraps, being very purposeful, doing embroidery, using all my matchy threads and needles. And she shows you how to do needle turn applique. She uses a different size needle, different type of thread, doesn't matter. Really, she promotes, similar to me, use what you've got. I just happen to have lots of different threads because I do a lot of stitching. So I will link her down below. Okay, that was pretty much, oh, okay, so since I'm already got you here for this long, somebody asked, how do you gather things together? How do you choose your fabrics for your projects? So I'm not going to address this. There is a quilt video. I will link this. So this quilt always gets lots of attention. I have the stuff here I was going to explain, but right now I'm going to say head on over to that video, scroll to the end, and you'll see about this. But it's going to have a new life, all the scraps, in a minute. Not in a minute. So I love storage. I love colors, and I love just looking at my fabrics. So I have this house is amazing for many different reasons, but I have a beautiful way that I get to have my fabrics stored. And I brought all my fabric storage from my last house, and it just fits even better in this house. But I use plastic, and this is how I have colors. So I have things folded, and I love just going in my closet and flipping through, and I fold these. It takes a lot of time, but I fold things approximate size so it can get organized. And I either do it by color, or I do it by designer, or I do it by style. So what do I mean by that? What I mean is I have Kansas Troubles, darks in one drawer, lights in another. Kim Deal, darks in one drawer, lights in another. I have tans here, but then I also have a drawer that is Civil War fabrics. So all the funky fun fabrics. Now, when I'm going to pull out fabrics for a quilt, I can click through. So it's like a library, but I can just flip through the fabrics because I have the fold on the end. And like I said, it does take time, but when I re-entered into my quilt world, after my mom's death, I had to take 2 years off from my sewing room. And then when I re-entered it, I tore it apart, put it back together, and that's the system I came up with. It took weeks, but it was very therapeutic. So as I was looking through this box, I thought, oh, this is just the kind of perfect fabric that I'm going to use for an upcoming project. So this is to answer the question. This is how I plan. So I love plastic boxes. Pros and cons. Fabrics don't always breathe in plastic, but they open up a lot, or I don't necessarily have the top on. So these are strips that are from that guy. When I made that guy, it was going to be a king size quilt originally. So I had lots of strips. So these were I have narrow strips, wider strips. And then when I finish a project, because I love log cabin blocks, if I have greens or tans, I go ahead and put them in here. So I try to keep organized as much as I can, because having a collection of fabric is not just so you can make a quilt. It gives me pleasure just looking at the fabric, especially when they're organized. So this is a book I got years ago, but this is, where's the quilt I want to make? This is the quilt I want to make. So I'm going to be gathering pinks and reds, and then I was looking and I thought, what's so unusual about this quilt? It has a lot of the medium toned florals, and I thought this will be perfect. So it goes in with all of these. So this is just I'm in the gathering stage. But in here also is this, because I was thinking, what is it? Like, this is another one I want to do pretty much exactly like it. I'm not going to do the wool applique. I'm going to do fabric, I think. But I love the tones. So this was from a Valentine's log cabin quilt that I did. I keep these things together because they're strips. So I can do this type of thing. Then this was a charm pack I got. And a lot of those colors, that's the tones. And then even though these, like, I may not do this bright pink one, I may do the darker ones. So that's how I draw things together. And the other thing I wanted to say is, I don't understand a color wheel. My brain does not work that way. It is not logical. My brain is emotional. So when I see colors like this, it had an emotion to me, and then it also was the logical of that was in the quilt. And then when I saw these, I thought, oh, lots of colors. So then this just sits here. This sits in my fabric closet, waiting for me to get inspired to play. And so I'm not regimented. I can't think like a lot of the ladies. And I said, there is a gentleman in my little mountain quilt guild. So I said, oh, I love being with the ladies. So the ladies and gentlemen. But I don't think logical. I don't think color wheel. I think color. How does it make me feel? The warm, muddy colors make me feel warm and cozy. I love them. And so that's where, like, I'll lay out fabrics and I'll think, how does it make me feel? Does it feel good? Or is one color grabbing my attention, and then I'll pull it out or put more with it. So hope that answers some of your questions. But the whole Jeri Bellini thing with the dots, I found this. This was left over from a project that I did up at the cabin. I still haven't shown you this quilt. But these were just fabrics, see the blues, from a project I had at the cabin. And I thought, that's perfect for the whole dot thing. So I'll start my cute little basket like Jeri and get all my stuff organized for that and start making those dots. But right now I have a lot of projects to finish. Whew. I still have stuff that I haven't shown you, but that's okay. We'll show you another time. So let me get my drink. Let's focus. There was a Jeff Allen is a Christian comedian, and he was talking. He was very attention deficit, and he was talking as someone told him, focus, focus. So that's what I do to myself. Focus, focus, girl. So thank you for joining in with me. Thank you for doing this journey with me. I didn't even get to what is a featherweight. I will. But a featherweight sewing machine, I have two. So a featherweight sewing machine was one made, I mentioned, in the 30s to the 60s. And it is what they said, light as a feather. Well, it's not exactly light as a feather, but it's nice and small. And this is Nora. So this is, that's the back. This is a featherweight sewing machine. Yes. Oh, weightlifter, but it is nice and light. And then you put that down and you sew. And they're beautiful. They have, this is, Nora has this decal on it, and Sadie over there has a different decal. But this is what the featherweights are. They're called featherweight 221s, and they are amazing to stitch with. Each one has a different personality, and each one is special. And I'm learning, I'm in a group with other people that have featherweights and learning how to work on them. So I will do. So here's my other thing. What questions do you have about these? Some people were saying they're thinking about getting one. And so what are some questions that you have? I'll do some type of video where I address the featherweight more, but I'm loving stitching with them, loving working with them, and loving trying to figure out how to make everything work together so my stitching is really good. So there we go. And I really am enjoying answering questions. So please ask questions. Now, I close out my videos with what I call the good stuff, but it's sharing a little bit about my life and then how I walk with my Jesus, how my faith helps me handle the ups and downs of my life. And it seems like I'm a roller coaster. And where's my paper? I had something very specific I wanted to share with you, and I still have so much stuff on here that I didn't get to share. Let's see what that paper is. Oh girl. Okay, I'll just tell you about it. So I have been in, I shared last time how I'm in a small group Bible study, and I really do it because I'm not disciplined, and it really helps me stay in the Word. And I'm getting together with other ladies, and I'm in a new community here too. So I'm wanting to meet new people. I'm missing my connections from my friends and neighbors in California, wanting some deep connections. And that's how you get really deep. Go to a Bible study and talk about life and share yourself. And so in that Bible study, one of my little group leader has been a leader, or she shared with me a paper that was very good for me because I wanted to know, I'm praying for my children. I have two adult children. I'm praying for them and their specific needs, because once a mother, always a mother. It's just different needs, and women tend to be more nurturing. And my children are on my heart a lot, and they're back in California, and so I want to pray for them specifically. So I know when the Word of God does not return void, and I'm really learning about what that means, but the Word of God is powerful. God is powerful. He is omniscient, which means He's everywhere. He's omnipotent, meaning He has power beyond belief. He is a higher, that's what people believe or don't believe in, a higher power. God is my high power. He is amazing. And I want to trust in a God who is way more above anything I can understand, because I got big problems. The world has big problems. I want a God who can handle that, who knows the end of the story, and He is in control. He is on His throne. So in all that, she gave me a sheet of paper, and I will try to link it. I tried to, she just gave it to me, but I was saying, how can I share this with other people? Because I knew I had to share it with you guys. But when you pray the scripture for your kids, and this is what it said too on this handout, but it was praying the scripture for your kids. You get the Word of God. So you get a Bible verse and you put someone's name in it. Myself, my husband, so I'm putting my kid's name in it. So it's praying the scriptures for your children. I have a whole book by Moms in Touch, Praying the Scriptures for Your Children. There's a website, and I hadn't been on it because I had never gone to a Moms in Touch prayer group. I wish I had, but it was amazing. I was reading through these scriptures, and it's so like whatever challenges your kids may be going through. So I have one of my kids is needing to find his place in the job market. So I can find a verse that has to do with finances or something like that and put his name in it. And that's where if I had it here in front of me, I could share that with you. But you have a Bible verse and then you put his name in there, and that's where it's like it's already almost an hour and a half and I got to close this out, but I had it somewhere here. I will address that again on the next video, but I will put a link in there to it. And then if you're interested, go and check it out. Their website, they have podcasts. They have so much available. If you look under resources, and then this was under the teacher guides, or you just Google Moms in Touch Praying Scripture Sheets, and you'll find them. But they have videos. They have specific prayer sheets for children. I think age-wise, like I have older kids, so one of them would be college-age kids. Prodigal children, which are children who have walked away from the Lord, and you want them to come back to the saving grace of Jesus. Then they have a sheet for kids with special needs. So huge information, but I need to close this video. But just wanted to, I will put that information in there for you. Hopefully you can find that, and then I'll have one and share with the next video. Thank you guys so much for being with me in this, and I am so amazed that I have now this whole new audience. Not audience, you are my stitching family. I'm not doing this for numbers. I'm not doing this for any reason except that I need to connect with other people who are stitchers that share my passion in this, and I want to glorify God. So that's what I asked God. If I get back into these videos again, because I took a 2-year break and I wasn't sure if I was going to do this again, and I'm like, God, if you want me to do this, help me get going again, and I want to glorify you. So this is how I can do it. I can glorify God with my passion for stitching, with sharing joy with people, with sharing a passion that I have for hand quilting. And it is like a dying art. So I really want to bring joy to people. So I pray that you would choose joy nevertheless. And I'm looking forward to meeting with you again soon. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.